Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive. This time we're tackling The One Thing by Gary Keller and Jay Papasan.
Ooh, yeah, this one's a classic.
It is. It's all about achieving extraordinary success by finding your one thing.
Basically, that single most important task that makes everything else easier or even unnecessary.
Right. And they even talk about this domino effect idea.
Oh, yeah. They describe this incredible chain reaction where one domino knocks over something the size of Mount Everest.
Crazy, right? It really makes you think about how powerful our actions can be.
Yeah, for sure. And they argue that success isn't about doing more, but about doing the right things.
I remember they start the book by debunking these common beliefs about success, what they call success lies.
Yeah, success-wise. Those are good. What was that first one again?
The first one is the idea that everything matters equally.
Right, right. And they actually use the 80-20 principle to debunk that one.
Oh, yeah. That 80% of our results come from just 20% of our effort.
Exactly. So it's all about figuring out which tasks are in that 20% and really focusing on those.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, so what's the next myth they tackle?
The next one is multitasking. Thinking we're being super productive when we juggle a bunch of things at
Oh,
once.
yeah, I'm definitely guilty of that one.
But research actually shows that multitasking makes us less productive and more prone to errors.
So it's like trying to drive a car and text at the same time.
Exactly. Dangerous and not effective at all.
That's a great analogy. Okay, so if multitasking is a myth, what do they suggest instead?
Well, that leads us to the third lifeline, the myth of a disciplined life.
So are they saying we don't need discipline?
Not exactly. They argue that we don't need more discipline, we just need to direct it better.
I see. So it's about focusing our discipline on the right things.
Exactly. Like, they use this analogy of a sprinkler versus a hose.
Okay, I'm
A
listening.
sprinkler spreads water everywhere, but a hose directs a powerful stream to one specific area.
I get it. So our discipline should be like that hose focused on our one thing.
Exactly.
That's a great visual. Okay, what about willpower? Don't we need tons of willpower to be successful?
That's actually the fourth lie. They debunk the idea that willpower is always on will call.
So are they saying willpower doesn't matter?
Not at all. They actually dive into some fascinating research on willpower, including that famous marshmallow test.
Oh, yeah, where they give kids marshmallows and tell them they can have two if they wait.
Exactly. And it turns out willpower is like a muscle. It gets tired.
So we only have so much willpower to use each day.
Exactly. Which is why it's important to tackle our most important tasks when our willpower is fresh.
That's good to know. I'm definitely going to have to rethink my to-do list strategy. What's the next myth on their list?
The next one might be a bit controversial. It's the myth of a balanced life.
Oh, interesting. We hear so much about work-life balance these days.
Right, but Keller and Papasan argue that constantly striving for perfect balance can actually hold us back.
So what do they suggest we do instead?
They introduce this idea of counterbalancing.
Counterbalancing, what's that?
It's like strategically shifting our focus between different areas of our life instead of trying to have everything perfectly balanced all the time.
Okay, that makes sense. I guess you can't always have it all.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's about finding that dynamic equilibrium that works for you.
Okay, so what's the final myth they debunk?
The final one is the idea that big is bad. That we should play it safe and stay small.
Oh, yeah. I think a lot of people struggle with that fear of thinking big.
Right. But they argue that thinking big is essential for extraordinary results.
They give some pretty amazing examples in the book, right?
Yeah, they do. Like the story of Subir Bhatia, the creator of Hotmail.
Didn't Microsoft buy Hotmail for a ton of money?
Yep. $400 million. And it's all because he dared to think big.
That's inspiring. Okay, so we've talked about these 6 success lies, but how do we actually figure out what our one thing is?
Well, that's where the heart of the book comes in, and it all starts with asking one powerful question.
Okay, I'm ready.
What's the question? What's the one thing I can do such that by doing it, everything else will be easier or unnecessary?
Wow, that's a good one. It seems simple, but I can see how it would really force you to prioritize.
It does. They call it the focusing question, and it can help you cut through the clutter and identify that one domino that will set off the chain reaction of success.
So it's not just about picking a task, it's about finding that linchpin action that will unlock the most progress.
Exactly.
But asking the question is just the first step, right? How do we actually make sure our one thing gets done?
That's where time blocking comes in.
Ah, yes, time blocking. I've heard a lot about it, but I've always been a little intimidated by it.
It can seem daunting, but it's basically just scheduling your one thing like you would an important meeting or a doctor's appointment.
So you're saying I should block off time on my calendar for my one thing?
Exactly. And they recommend aiming for at least a 4-hour block each day.
4 hours? That seems like a lot.
It might sound like a lot, but think about how much time we waste on distractions and less important tasks.
Yeah, that's true. I guess if we're constantly reacting to whatever pops up, our one thing will never get the attention it deserves.
Exactly. Time blocking helps us be proactive and intentional with our time.
I see your point.
Yeah.
So time blocking is key, but it's not the whole story, right?
Right. It's most effective when you combine it with 3 key commitments.
3 commitments. Tell me more.
The first one is following the path of mastery.
Mastery sounds intense.
It can be, but it's really about embracing the process of continuous learning and improvement.
So it's not about being perfect. It's about always striving to get better.
Exactly.
Okay, what's the second commitment?
It's about moving from what they call an entrepreneurial mindset to a more purposeful approach.
Entrepreneurial to purposeful. What's the difference?
Well, an entrepreneurial mindset relies on our current abilities and knowledge,
Okay.
but a purposeful approach is about always seeking out better methods and systems.
So it's about being open to learning new things and challenging our own assumptions.
Exactly.
I like that. Okay, what about the third commitment?
The third commitment is living the accountability cycle.
Accountability. That's a big one.
It is. It's about taking ownership of our outcomes and recognizing that we have the power to create the results we want.
So it's about moving from a victim mentality to an empowered state.
Exactly.
This is all so helpful, but I have a feeling there are still obstacles that can get in the way, even when we're committed to our one thing.
You're absolutely right. And the book actually identifies 4 thieves of productivity that can steal our time and focus.
Ooh, 4 thieves. That sounds ominous. We'll have to save those for next time.
Sounds good. We'll dive into those thieves in our next segment.
Can't wait. Listeners, start thinking about what your one thing might be, and we'll be back soon to help you tackle those productivity thieves. We're back and ready to tackle those 4 thieves of productivity. Last time we were talking about the focusing question and time blocking, but I have a feeling things can still go off track, even with the best intentions.
Absolutely. Even if you know your one thing and you've got it blocked off on your calendar, these thieves can still sneak in and steal your time and focus.
Okay, so who's the first thief we need to watch out for?
The first one is the inability to say no.
Oh, yeah. I struggle with that one big time. It's so hard to turn down requests even when I'm already feeling overwhelmed.
It's a common trap. We want to be helpful and accommodating, but sometimes saying yes actually sabotages our own goals.
Right. We end up spreading ourselves too thin and nothing gets done well.
Exactly. Remember that 80-20 principle we talked about? Every time you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else.
That's a good point. It's not about being selfish. It's about being strategic with our time and energy.
Exactly. So before you say yes, ask yourself, does this align with my one thing? Will this help me achieve my most important goals?
I love that. So who's the next thief on the list?
The next one is the fear of chaos.
Fear of chaos. How does that steal our productivity?
Well, sometimes pursuing our one thing means embracing a little bit of disruption and uncertainty.
I can see that.
Ah,
It can be tempting to stick with what's familiar, even if it's not working for us.
Right. We get comfortable with our routines and habits, but real growth often happens outside of our comfort zone.
Yeah, that's true. I remember when I first started time blocking, it felt a little chaotic at first.
I bet. It takes some adjusting.
It did, but once I got used to it, I realized how much more productive I was.
Exactly. Sometimes you just have to trust the process and embrace the messiness.
Okay, so the first thief is the inability to say no. The second is the fear of chaos. What about the third one? Any guesses?
Third thief is poor health habits.
That makes sense.
Hmm.
You can't be productive if you're running on fumes.
Right. When we're sleep deprived, stressed out, or eating junk food, our focus and energy levels take a nosedive.
So it's like trying to run a marathon on an empty stomach.
Exactly. You can't perform at your best if you're not taking care of yourself.
So prioritizing self-care is actually a key part of achieving our one thing.
It is. Getting enough sleep, eating healthy foods, exercising regularly, managing stress. These things are all crucial for sustained productivity.
It's like they say you can't pour from an empty cup.
Exactly. Okay, ready for thief number 4?
Hit me with it.
This one can be a bit tricky. It's an unsupportive environment.
An unsupportive environment. That could be anything from a noisy office to a critical boss.
It could be. Or even well-meaning friends and family who don't understand your goals.
Oh yeah, that's tough. You can't always control your environment, especially when it involves other people.
True, but there are things you can do to mitigate the challenges.
Like what?
Well, for example, if you're working in a distracting environment,
Uh,
could you create a dedicated workspace, even if it's just a corner of your bedroom?
yeah, that's a good idea. Or maybe invest in some noise-canceling headphones.
Exactly. And if you're dealing with unsupportive people, try setting clear boundaries and communicating your needs effectively.
So sometimes it's just about having an open and honest conversation with the people in your life.
Right? Let them know about your goals and why they're important to you. You might be surprised at the support you receive.
That's a great point. Okay, so we've got these four thieves: the inability to say no, the fear of chaos, poor health habits in an unsupportive environment. But how do we actually combat them?
That's where that time blocking strategy comes in again.
Oh, right. So it's not just about blocking off time for our one thing, it's also about being strategic about managing distractions and potential roadblocks.
Exactly. If you tend to get sucked into social media, for example, maybe block off your one thing time in the morning before you even check your phone.
That's smart. Or maybe you designate a specific workspace and let your family know that when you're in that space, you're not to be disturbed.
Exactly. It's all about being proactive and creating an environment that supports your one thing.
I love that. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground today, but can we circle back to that idea of counterbalancing for a minute?
Sure. What about it?
I'm still a little fuzzy on how it works in practice.
Well, remember, it's not about achieving perfect balance in every area of your life at all times. It's about being intentional and recognizing that sometimes you need to prioritize one area over others.
So if I'm working on a big project at work, it's okay if my social life takes a hit for a while.
Exactly.
Hmm.
It's not about neglecting those other areas of your life. It's about recognizing that for a certain period, your work needs to be the priority.
And then once that project is finished, you can shift your focus back to your relationships or hobbies.
Right. It's like a pendulum swinging back and forth.
Sometimes towards work, sometimes towards family, sometimes towards personal time.
That's a great way to put it. And the key is to be mindful of the swing to make sure it's not getting stuck in one direction for too long.
So if you find yourself feeling burned out or neglecting important relationships, it might be time to adjust the swing.
Exactly. It's all about being self-aware and making conscious choices about where you're directing your energy and attention.
Okay, I'm starting to get it.
Mm,
But isn't it easy to lose sight of the big picture when you're so focused on your one thing?
That's a good point. And that's where the book introduces this cool tool called goal setting to the now.
Goal setting to the now. What's that?
It's basically a way to connect your daily actions to your long-term goals.
I like the sound of that. Tell me more.
Imagine you have this big, ambitious goal, right? Maybe it's writing a book or starting a business.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
Goal setting to the now involves working backwards from that goal, breaking it down into smaller and smaller chunks.
Until you arrive at the one thing you can do today to move you closer to your goal.
Exactly. It's like reverse engineering your success.
So you're creating a roadmap that connects your present actions to your future aspirations.
You got it. And the book actually illustrates this with a story about a father and son who are putting together a puzzle of the world.
Wait, I think I remember that one. The father tears up a picture of the world into tiny pieces to keep his son busy, and then the son puts it back together in like 5 minutes.
Yep, that's the one. And the secret to the son's success, he focused on assembling the image of the person on the puzzle first.
Oh, right. And once he got that part done, the rest of the pieces fell into place.
Exactly. It's such a great analogy for the power of focusing on our one thing, that most important piece of the puzzle.
It really is. By focusing on the right thing, everything else becomes easier or even unnecessary.
Right. And goal setting to the now is a great way to make sure we're always working on the most important piece of the puzzle, the one thing that will have the biggest impact on our long-term goals.
This is so helpful. But what about those times when we inevitably hit roadblocks and setbacks? How do we stay motivated when things get tough?
That's where the book's emphasis on purpose and fulfillment comes in.
Right. You can't just rely on willpower all the time.
Exactly. Remember when we talked about those 6 lies?
Yeah, we debunked all sorts of myths about
Well,
success.
one of those lies was the pursuit of a balanced life.
Oh, yeah. And instead of striving for perfect balance, you said we should focus on counterbalancing.
Right. Strategically shifting our focus between different areas of our life.
Okay. And how does that tie in with staying motivated?
Well, it connects to what the book says about the difference between happiness and fulfillment.
Happiness versus fulfillment. I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
They argue that happiness is often fleeting, a temporary emotional boost.
Like when you eat a delicious piece of cake?
Exactly.
Hmm.
But fulfillment runs much deeper. It's a sense of purpose and meaning.
So it's about feeling like your life has a deeper significance.
Exactly. And the book suggests that when we're deeply connected to our purpose, those inevitable challenges and setbacks feel less daunting.
That makes sense. If we're just chasing happiness, we're likely to get discouraged when things get tough.
Right. But if we're driven by a sense of purpose, we're more likely to persevere and find meaning in the struggle.
I like that. Purpose over happiness. But how do we even figure out what our purpose is?
Well, the book doesn't give a simple formula for that. It's a journey of self-discovery.
So there's no magic answer.
Not really. But they do encourage you to approach it with curiosity and openness to explore different possibilities.
So it's about experimenting and seeing what resonates with you.
Exactly. And you can actually use the focusing question to guide this journey.
Oh, interesting. How so?
You can ask yourself, what's the one thing I can do this week to connect with my values and explore my passions such that by doing it, everything else will be easier or unnecessary?
I love that. It's about taking action, not just sitting around waiting for inspiration to strike.
You got it. And as you experiment and explore, you can use the other insights from the book goal setting to the now time blocking, the 3 commitments, and the strategies for battling those 4 thieves of productivity to make progress and create a life that is both successful and fulfilling.
This is all so valuable, but I have a feeling there's one more crucial piece of the puzzle that we need to discuss.
You're right. And it all comes down to the power of legacy.
Oh, legacy. I love
Yeah.
that word. It's about the impact we make on the world, the mark we leave behind.
Exactly. And the book challenges us to think about our legacy in a very specific way. They ask us to imagine ourselves at the end of our lives looking back on our journey.
Wow, that's powerful. It really makes you think about what matters most.
It does. They want us to ask ourselves, what do we want to be remembered for? What kind of impact do we want to have on the world?
And then use those reflections to guide our present actions and choices.
Exactly. It's about living our lives with intention, making decisions that align with our values and contribute to a legacy that we can be proud of.
So it's not just about achieving success in the moment, it's about creating something that will last beyond our lifetime.
Precisely. And they even use the analogy of a tombstone.
A tombstone.
And they ask, what do you want your tombstone to say? What words do you want to be etched in stone to represent your life's work and impact?
That's such a thought-provoking question. It really puts things into perspective.
It does. And remember, legacy isn't just about grand gestures
Mhm.
or monumental achievements. It's about the small, everyday actions that add up over time.
So it's about the kindness we show to others, the contributions we make to our communities, the way we live our lives with integrity and purpose.
You got it. It's about making a positive difference in the world, however we can let.
This is all so inspiring, but I'm wondering, how do we take all of these insights and actually put them into practice?
Well, that's where the rubber meets the road. And in our next segment, we'll explore some practical tips for applying the one thing to different areas of your life.
I can't wait. Until then, listeners, I encourage you to start reflecting on your own legacy. What kind of impact do you want to make on the world? What steps can you take today to start building that legacy?
Welcome back to the show. We've covered so much ground already with the one thing, but I'm ready to get practical. How do we actually put all of these ideas into action?
That's a million-dollar question. And the good news is the book gives us lots of practical examples for using the focusing question and other strategies in different areas of our lives. Think careers, relationships, personal growth, you name it.
Perfect. I'm ready to roll up my sleeves and get to work on my own. One thing. Let's start with careers. How can we apply these concepts in our professional lives? Well, the book suggests using the focusing question to figure out the one thing you can do each day to really move a current project forward.
Hmm.
Like, what can you do to get ahead of schedule and exceed expectations?
I like that idea. It's not just about getting things done, it's about going above and beyond.
Exactly. And when you block off time early in the day to work on that one thing, you're giving it your best energy and focus.
That makes a lot of sense. So you're setting yourself up for success, but are there other ways we can use the focusing question in our careers?
Absolutely. Think about your professional development. What's the one thing you can do, say, this month, to really boost your skills or knowledge in a certain area?
So that one thing could be taking an online course or attending an industry event.
Exactly. Or maybe it's shadowing a colleague or signing up for a mentorship program, whatever it is. Schedule it in your calendar, just like any other important meeting.
I love that. We've got to be proactive about our professional growth.
Right. It's an investment in yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now let's switch gears and talk about relationships.
Yes. I think this is so important. It's easy to let relationships slide when we're busy with work and other stuff.
Totally agree. And the book reminds us that we can use the focusing question here too. What's that one thing you can do this week, for example, to improve a specific relationship with your partner, a friend, or a family member?
Okay, so we're getting specific here. Not just generic gestures, but something that will make a real impact.
Exactly. Maybe it's scheduling a regular date night or making time for a weekly phone call. Maybe it's just being more present and engaged when you are together.
It's about being intentional and making quality time a priority.
Right. Don't let those relationships run on autopilot.
This is great stuff. Now, what about personal growth and well-being?
Same principle applies. You can use the focusing question to get clarity on your goals.
So something like, what's the one thing I can do this year to really improve my physical health?
Exactly. Or your mental well-being, or any other area of personal growth that's important to you. Maybe it's finally committing to that exercise routine or addressing that sleep issue you've been ignoring.
Once you identify that one thing, you can use time blocking to make it happen.
Exactly. Schedule it in, treat it like an important appointment,
Mhm.
and don't let anything get in the way.
This is also practical and actionable. I'm feeling super inspired to go out there and make my one thing happen.
That's the spirit. Remember, it's not about doing everything. It's about doing the right thing.
Focusing on that one domino that will create a ripple effect of positive results.
Exactly. So listeners, we've got one final question for you. What's your one thing? What's that single most important action you can take right now to achieve your biggest goals and create a life that you truly love?
Take some time to reflect on that question. And remember, as the authors say, what if the regret of not having done enough is entirely preventable? The tools and strategies we've discussed today can help you make sure you don't end up with that regret.
You have the power to make your one thing a reality.
That's a wrap on another deep dive. We hope you enjoyed it. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep striving for those extraordinary results.